Right, hello guys and welcome back, and the epic raid of the Desert Perpetual is approaching very fast. In fact, it is this weekend, and today I thought I would bring you part one of a two-part series that I am starting on this channel, which is just going to be giving you everything you need to know in preparation for the epic raid. And today we are going to be covering how your team should be dealing damage in a epic raid not swap environment. And yes, this video is aimed at the contest experience. However, the information I present to you in this video could very easily be taken into the normal version of the epic raid after contest mode is over, because Bungie have stated that even in the normal version, if you do it with at least 3 feats, you are going to be under the effects of the not swap modifier. So even away from contest, you are not going to be able to escape not swap. So today I'm going to show you everything that works in a not swap environment, showcase the stats, the mods, leave you with some dim links, and hopefully you're going to leave today feeling prepared and confident in your team's ability and yourself to deal damage in the Desert Perpetual. And tomorrow's video is going to cover everything related to builds for the epic raid. So this is, like I said, a two-parter job. So as far as damage is concerned, the number one weapon that your team should be concerned about is Finality's Augur. This weapon is, if it's not disabled, is going to be the GOAT of the raid race, because it is just very good at lots of different things that gel well with the Desert Perpetual. For starters, this thing is very good at generating super energy, something which is very important in the Desert Perpetual because of how long the damage phases of the bosses are, especially now that Outbreak, Barrow Dyad, and Hierarchy of Needs have all been slashed in their ability to generate consistent super damage. Finality's Augur is the only thing, or one of the few things, that is left over that's still very good at doing that, especially in a not swap environment as well, with how restricted you are with your armor usage and so on. It's going to be quite good for that. And reason number two, this gun is actually very good for neutral game. You can just kind of, pop a turret off in the distance and use it to kill ads for you while you're just doing other things, and you don't even have to think about it. It's very nice for just popping it, especially because of how ammo efficient it is. It only costs 3 ammo to make a turret. I'll make it in the corner here so it doesn't shoot Carl, but it costs 3 ammo. It doesn't actually reduce the size of your magazine, and you can just leave it there. You can paint the ground, you can make it attached to whatever target you want to. It does provide a very good amount of stagger as well. I use it to kill the wyverns in the hobgoblin encounter, for example. So yeah, that's the other reason why it's so good. But obviously the third and most important reason, it does quite a lot of damage in the allotted time that you have in the encounters in the raid. So before I show you how to carry out an optimal damage rotation with Finality's Augur, I'm going to go over the weapons and the mods that you need to make it work. We're not going to talk too much about subclass and things like that, because that is what I'm saving for tomorrow's video. So weapons wise, you are going to want a Mint Retrograde, a SMG such as the Yeartide Apex, specifically with Attrition Orbs and Chaos Reshaped, or if you are lucky and have a tier 5 Antidate with Rewind Target Lock. You could do either, it doesn't really matter. The damage from your SMG isn't that insane. The reason we have an SMG here is to generate more super energy while our Mint is gone, for example, and Finality is just ticking in the background. So get yourself either a Yeartide Apex if you got one from Solstice, or an Antidate with Rewind Target Lock. Now remember, in the epic raid, Bungie have enabled the use of seasonal mods, and they have enabled the bonuses from new gear. So what those bonuses are the damage resistance that you get from wearing armor pieces, which you can see on the top there, and then the new gear weapons bonus, where you get a maximum 10% increased damage for each weapon slot based on the tier of the weapon, or if it's exotic, it's 10%. So because I have a tier 5 Mint Retrograde and a tier 5 Yeartide Apex, both of these weapons are dealing 10% more damage just because they are tier 5. I have thoughts about that system, but today is not the video for that. And because Finality's Augur is a featured exotic, it too will be dealing 10% more damage. So make sure you have these in the highest tier possible. Tier 4 and 5 is still fine, but if I equip my tier 3 Antidate here, if I go back into my artifact, you'll see that my energy slot weapon now does 6% more damage because it's only tier 3, and I've been very unlucky with my Antidates. Artifact wise, the important ones you're going to need are Elemental Benevolence, Threadling Proliferation, Pack Tactics, Refresh Threads, Elemental Coalescence, Energy Acceleration, Shoulder to Shoulder, very important. I believe it's a 20% damage resist when you get this going, and Shield Crush. I can have the artifact on screen here if you would like to pause and take a copy. Not too many notes on this, just these are the ones that you want to worry about for the raid. And then for your armor mods, I have 2 builds. The first is triple Solar Surge with, double Solar Loader, triple Super Fonts on your helmet, which will give you 200 super if you have at least 150 natural stat, and then as much weapon stat as you can get. And the way I'm able to achieve this distribution is by using 4 pieces of gunner armor with very well-rolled stats. I went overboard with the farming for this, but that's because my team is very serious about going for worlds first. You don't need these stats, but I will go over this more in tomorrow's builds video. The thing you need to be aware of is just the mods for now. Like I said, the first loadout I have is got triple Solar Surge on it, and the second I have triple Strand Surge. You could do a mix if you didn't want to have multiple loadouts. You could go with 2 Solar, 1 Strand, or 2 Strand, 1 Solar. You kind of want to judge it based on the encounter, but the reason I have 2 is that because the damage phases are so long, for the beginning of the damage phases, all I do is use my turret, then my SMG, then near the sort of latter half, I will then do the rest of my mint, swapping to that loadout. So basically, how to do this rotation, it is fairly simple. All you need to do is make sure that your finality is in create turret mode. So normally it starts you off in linear fusion mode. Just make sure that you hold R and click it into create turret mode. The biggest sort of skill ceiling with Finality's Augur is making sure that you remember to proc bait and switch, because that's what its catalyst is. So if you don't have the catalyst and you do have the gun, go and do it, because it gives it, 30% more damage. But assuming everything goes right and the damage phase begins, you are going to place a turret up in the sky. You're going to proc bait and switch here, and then you're going to go back to your SMG and just keep dogging on him with your SMG for as long as you can. This is having assumed you've used your super already. In fact, I'll use it here just to show you the super gains, and then make sure to reproc bait and switch. In fact, there we go. Need to reproc it here. And if you look at my super bar, I am on Curious, which is a one-off super, but it is climbing relatively quickly. And bear in mind that this would be climbing faster if you had hunters using their golden guns to make orbs, or, if you were in a well, you're actually dealing more damage per bullet, which will increase the amount you get from this. So you'll be making orbs, your teammates will be making orbs from their year tides if they have it, and then once it's gone, which lasts for about 30 seconds, you will literally repeat the same process again, make a new turret, make sure you proc bait and switch, and remember to paint as well. That's what I forgot from last time. Remember to paint the boss, and then just keep going with the SMG. And as you can see now, I remember to paint him properly, and it is generating a pretty decent amount of super energy, which will be higher if you have all the buffs and teammates and so on. So we'll just keep going. We're going to reproc bait here, keep going with my SMG, and then I'll be able to get my Curious back. There we go. Now we have to create the turret again and just rinse repeat the whole process. As you can see, that lasted for about a minute, that little yap session there, and I still have a good amount of ammo left, and obviously infinite SMG ammo, and then plenty of min retrograde. In actual practical cases, I tend to save my ammo for the third phase of Epoptes, for example. After you break the third lenses, you normally have enough time to dump all of your mint by then. Same thing for Agrios. I save most of my mint for when either he teleports up top or for the third damage phase, and then for Korgos, it's the same sort of thing. You save it for after the third portal, for example. So if you wanted an actual practical illustration of how a full optimized group of this damage rotation does versus one of the bosses, here is my team using it versus the 4 feet Iatros or the Wyvern encounter. Yeah. I'm gonna get my crash in a second. And also, here are some screenshots of how much health was left on Epoptes and Agrios when we use the strategy, so it's very solid for getting those bosses down a lot in just a single phase, but obviously they have way too much health compared to the Wyvern, so that's why we are not one-phasing them, but as you can see, we do get very close. I mentioned it a little earlier as well, but this strategy is also very ammo efficient, especially if you're running high weapon stat, which you should be for the Epic Raid. It avoids the need for any Cenotaph or Aeon's usage, so you can very much just use it in neutral game to help you out with ad clear, and also have plenty of ammo going into damage and still remain with ammo after the damage phase is over. So just to reiterate, if your team is not going in with Finality's Augur and you're using some sort of different strategy like rockets or grenade launchers, for example, do take some time to reevaluate. This weapon is going to dominate the meta for the Epic Raid and just in general after contest as well. Now, for the second rotation that I wanted to show you today is a slight alternative to Finality's Augur, which I don't recommend using on every boss, but you could use it on the Wyvern or the final boss, and this is using Parasite instead of Finality's Augur. And my team, we jokingly call this rotation chicken, either because this ornament makes the gun look like a chicken, or I think it's based off Chicken SI2's channel or something, based on an old rotation of his. Using Parasite is rather comparable, which seems strange because Parasite is more of a burst weapon, but the reason we are able to use it in a similar fashion is because of Solar Holster. Solar Holster is going to allow your Parasite to auto-load itself while you stow it, letting you deal damage damage in the meantime with Mint Retrograde or a different weapon, and then just keep swapping between that and Parasite. And the other advantage that Parasite has is Worm Byproduct. This perk states that taking damage from your own worm projectile detonation empowers your weapons for a short time. And this is a 10-second buff, and it's actually a 15% unique buff, as in it'll stack with Whale, it'll stack with debuffs, it'll stack with your surges, it stacks multiplicatively with everything. That's what makes it unique. Normally, for a boss like Korgos or Iatros, you are going to be right in their faces, which is perfect for Parasite because that means you're going to get Worm Byproduct for every single time you shoot the gun. And that means that your Min Retrograde is going to be dealing 15% more damage. And I also forgot to mention that for both of these guns, or all of your legendary weapons, you should be using Temporal Armaments. I'm pretty sure that Temporal Blast is dead now, and I think Temporal Armaments is the way to go. Because when enhanced, this mod gives you a additional 17% damage versus Vex, so 70% is actually pretty substantial. So having that on all of your guns, make sure that you do. So the only difference for this build is literally the fact that we have changed our surge distribution to be 1 strand, 1 solar, and then solar holster, and then obviously swapping Finality's Augur for Parasite. Sadly, Parasite is not a featured weapon, so you are not getting the 10% bonus from it, but it still produces results. So in terms of how to actually do the rotation, there's first a cool piece of tech that I want to show you, which is the fact that when you cast a super, it counts as stowing the weapon. So if I shoot Parasite here, and then I do my Thunder Crash, by the time that I come out of my Thunder Crash, my Parasite is reloaded because of Solar Holster. So that is something to keep in mind. So when starting the rotation, you want to do a Parasite into a Thunder Crash, then into another Parasite, which should splash and give you Worm Byproduct, then go 1, 2, then 3 shots of Mint, back to Parasite, then 2 shots of Mint, and then you can just keep cycling Parasite, 2 shots of Mint, Parasite, 2 shots of Mint. And the reason you do 3 at the beginning is because of some weird timing thing where for some reason the Parasite doesn't auto-load in 2 shots of Mint. It has to be 3 for some reason, but that is only on the first shot of Parasite. So you would do Parasite, then 1, 2, 3 shots of Mint, back to Parasite here, and then you can get away with doing 2 shots and it will load in time because of Solar Holster and making sure to proc Worm Byproduct, obviously. Now, the thing is with this rotation is that if you had a Min Retrograde, you could use your Min Retrograde with Bait and Switch, but I prefer Elemental Honing. So in actuality, what I would do here instead of Yeartide Apex is I'd probably swap to a Void weapon like the Reckless Oracle, because with that, I'm dealing strand damage here, Arc from my super, then Solar from Parasite, meaning I can get to ×4 Elemental Honing with Min Retrograde, lasts for 23 seconds, 30% damage buff. So that's just another thing to be aware of, keeping on top of your honing stacks, but you could use Bait and Switch version as well, which is basically the same thing. You just have to make sure you tap him with your energy weapon at the same time. So that rotation is pretty simple, and now I'm just going to roll a clip of me using it versus Greg to show you how this does solo.
Should be fine.
Wonderful. Fantastic. So yeah, as you can see, still a very solid damage strategy that is able to kill Greg completely solo, which, you know, if a rotation can do that, is very solid because Greg is a pretty decent benchmark for any sort of damage rotation. And if your whole team is using this, then you are still going to do a lot of damage to bosses. I don't have a clip of it, but me and my team were able to consistently one-phase Iatros again on the 4 feet version of the raid using this strategy. It just so happens that Finality's Augur can do that as well. So it's really up to you which strategy you want to go for. I just thought I'd highlight Parasite as well because it's also very good on the very unlikely off chance that Finality's Augur gets disabled, which hopefully it shouldn't, but if it doesn't, you know where to go. So lastly, I just wanted to leave off with some notes regarding team comp, and I wanted to tell you what my team is running. So my team is running 2-2-2, as in 2 Titans, 2 Hunters, and 2 Warlocks. The 2 Titans are going to be using Curus of the Falling Star, like I am here. This is going to be our main exotic. We haven't really had a lot of practice with Peacekeepers, so this is just something that we're comfortable with, which is Curus. Curus also has a decent bit of neutral game where melee final blows while amplified grant you super energy, so it's just nice to get your super back guaranteed for every single damage phase. And in places where that matters is Iatros, because the actual mechanics phase is pretty short. So something like PKs could also work, but you know, I haven't practiced with it, so I prefer Curus. Both of our Warlocks, we have one of them on Boots of the Assembler, which by the way, very important, is the default damage meta for Warlocks for any sort of endgame content going forward, because as of the Ashen Iron patch, they have fixed Boots of the Assembler to now make it so the projectiles attached to targets that are within your own Well of Radiance. So basically, you're giving your teammates a 24/7 35% damage buff versus 25%, which it normally is. So you definitely want to have one Warlock using Boots of the Assembler, and the other we just have on Sanguine Alchemy at the moment just to boost their damage output. Could swap them on Speaker Sight as well, but if said Warlock is confident in their ability to stay alive, they don't need Speaker Sight. Then finally, the two Hunters, we have both of them on the Certarachne class item, and Grapple as well, which makes it so, whenever they use their Grapple, they get 10 seconds of Woven Mail, which is excellent for survivability, and Hunter has Ascension as well, which is very good for getting you amplified, making enemies less accurate when targeting you. They are going to be the main sort of mechanic people doing all of the mechanics in the encounters and staying alive, doing all the important jobs for the team. Furthermore, the Hunters are also going to be responsible for making orbs for your team with their golden guns. Now, we don't put them on Celestial Nighthawk because in Desert Perpetual that is a waste. You want your Hunters to be the people making orbs that feed your Titans and your Warlocks so that they get their Thunder Crashes back and they all get their Wells back in time so that they have 24/7 uptime on the Wells and they also get their Thunder Crashes back, the Titans, very quickly. Because the Titans are the main damage dealers, the Warlocks play the support role, giving the highest damage buffs and constant Wells and Song of Flame in the case of Iatros, and Hunters are excellent for, for the encounter mechanics like I just said. So that is basically my advice on the team comp. I will talk about this more in tomorrow's video when I go over the builds, but today I just wanted to get everything out of the way in terms of damage. So to summarize, you definitely just want to focus on Finality's Augur or Parasite, depending on the ban list. We're still kind of waiting. There is some talk relating to the Haliatus rocket, which is pretty good, especially if you have the role of Cluster Bomb and Aggregate Charge. However, my inclination is that either the rocket itself or the Bray Legacy Origin trait is going to be disabled. So I'm not putting a lot of stock into this rocket. I think it's going to be disabled. Then other strategies like Thunderlord are not very good anymore, like you saw in the day one. Same with like Thunderlord, Lord of Wolves. They've just been outclassed by Finality's Augur. It's just better because of it being able to take advantage of the new gear bonuses, which in the last race they didn't. So that's basically going to be it for today's video. I hope you learned something new. I hope you learned some useful information about how to deal damage in this upcoming Epic Raid experience. And I will see you tomorrow where we talk about the builds that I recommend your team using. So until then, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.